There is a hidden pattern in human behavior, an ancient psychological truth. People don't react to who you are. They react to who they become in your presence. When your growth exposes their stagnation, when your strength reveals their avoidance, when your clarity uncovers their confusion, hatred becomes a defense, not a judgment. People never examine their inner world. Walk through life with shadows they pretend not to have. But the moment you grow, evolve, heal, or rise, you unknowingly shine a light on those shadows. And instead of facing themselves, many choose the easier path to blame you, attack you, distance themselves from you. People project the parts of themselves they refuse to face because the mind has an instinctive need to protect itself from discomfort, even if that protection creates distortion. When someone encounters a trait in another person that mirrors something unresolved within them, the reaction is rarely conscious. Instead, it is a reflex, a psychological defense that shifts the discomfort outward. Rather than admitting this is something within me I haven't healed, the mind says this is something wrong with you. And in that split second, projection becomes a shield against inner confrontation. Human beings carry an entire landscape of hidden fears, insecurities, memories, and tendencies they prefer not to acknowledge. These unexamined parts form what psychology calls the shadow, the aspects of ourselves we repress, deny, or avoid. But the shadow never disappears just because we ignore it. It shows up through emotion, reaction, judgment, and behavior, and it reveals itself most clearly in how we see other people. When someone irritates you for no logical reason, when someone's confidence feels like arrogance to you, when someone's success feels like a threat rather than inspiration, it is often because they're touching a part of you that you have not yet embraced. Projection happens when the unconscious mind disowns one of its traits and locates it in another person. The mind says, "This is not me," and then immediately assigns it to the nearest available target. For example, a person who suppresses their anger will accuse others of being hostile. Someone who refuses to face their own selfishness will constantly accuse others of taking advantage of them. A person who denies their ambition will resent those who pursue their goals with passion. And someone terrified of their own vulnerability will call others weak, overly emotional, or dramatic. The traits they cannot tolerate in themselves become intolerable when seen in someone else. This is why people suddenly dislike you, challenge you, or react strongly to your presence without any clear reason. You may simply be embodying something they have buried within themselves. Your honesty might expose their avoidance. Your confidence might expose their self-doubt. Your discipline might expose their lack of direction. Your emotional openness might expose their emotional numbness. Without trying, you become a mirror. And people who are not ready to confront their reflections will attempt to break the mirror instead of looking into it. Projection also occurs because people fear acknowledging their flaws. To admit this trait lives within me requires courage, vulnerability, and self-awareness, qualities many people never cultivate. It is easier to judge someone else than to explore the discomfort within oneself. It is easier to criticize than to reflect. It is easier to blame than to understand. Projection becomes a shortcut to feeling morally superior, emotionally safe, and internally justified. The mind says, if I can locate this flaw in you, then I don't have to recognize it in myself. This dynamic plays out in relationships, friendships, families, and workplaces. The friend who accuses you of being distant might be the one afraid of intimacy. The partner who calls you controlling might be projecting their own need for control. The coworker who insists you're competitive might actually be threatened by your competence. The family member who claims you think you're better than everyone might be masking their own feelings of inadequacy. Their reactions reveal more about their internal landscape than about your character. The painful irony is that projection prevents real connection. When someone views you through the lens of their own unhealed wounds, they are not relating to you. They are relating to their own fear in disguise. They are not seeing who you are, they are seeing what they cannot face within themselves. And because they cannot confront their inner truth, they distort your image to fit the story they need to believe. This distortion can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, emotional distance, and a profound sense of being unseen. But projection also reveals something important. People react strongest to the qualities they secretly wish they had. Jealousy, irritation, and resentment often come from admiration that has nowhere to go. When someone wants to be more confident, they judge those who are. When someone wants to be more free, they judge those who live unapologetically. When someone wants to be more expressive, they judge those who speak boldly. Their criticism is a confession of their desire, wrapped in denial. Understanding projection allows you to detach from others' reactions. When you realize that many judgments directed at you are actually reflections of someone else's inner conflict, you stop internalizing their negativity. You stop trying to fix yourself to soothe someone else's unhealed wounds, and you stop shrinking yourself to avoid triggering their discomfort. Instead, you begin to see clearly that what they project onto you is often the very part of themselves they have never dared to face. Your transformation disrupts old dynamics because change, even when healthy, threatens the roles and patterns people have grown comfortable with. Most relationships, whether friendships, family ties, or work connections, are built around unspoken agreements. You play a certain role, they play another, and the interaction flows in predictable ways. But the moment you begin to evolve, those silent contracts start to unravel. People who once depended on your old identity feel destabilized by your new one, not because you harmed them, but because you no longer fit the mold they were using to navigate their relationship with you. When you grow, you unintentionally shift the balance that others relied on. If you were always agreeable, your newfound assertiveness feels confrontational. If you were always self-doubting, your confidence feels like defiance. If you were always emotionally available, your boundaries feel like rejection. You are not disrupting the relationship through wrongdoing. You are disrupting it through evolution. The discomfort others feel is a sign that they associated your identity with their own stability, and now that identity is changing, they must adapt or resist. Many choose resistance because adaptation requires self-reflection, effort, and a willingness to grow alongside you. Transformation also threatens familiarity. People learn to predict your reactions, your habits, your weaknesses, and your limits. Predictability gives them a sense of control, even if they never consciously acknowledge it. When you begin to rise, heal, or expand, that predictability dissolves. You no longer react the way you used to. You no longer tolerate what you once ignored. You no longer stay silent where you once remained passive. This unpredictability forces others to adjust their behavior, and adjustment requires energy. Those unwilling to invest that energy interpret your growth as a disturbance rather than an opportunity. Your transformation also forces others to confront their own stagnation. When someone witnesses you changing your life, it subtly asks them the question, why aren't you changing yours? This is uncomfortable. It is easier for people to remain in denial when everyone around them is also staying the same. Your growth breaks the illusion that staying stuck is normal or acceptable. It highlights what they have avoided, postponed, or feared addressing. Instead of seeing your transformation as inspiration, many will see it as a threat to their comfort zone. The tension they feel is not caused by your new path, but by the contrast it creates with their old patterns. In relationships that depended on your limitations, transformation feels especially disruptive. If someone relied on your lack of boundaries to get what they wanted, your newfound strength feels like a loss of power. If someone depended on your insecurity to superior, your confidence feels like an attack. If someone needed you to remain small so they could remain comfortable, your expansion feels like betrayal. Reactions reveal how much of the relationship was built on imbalance rather than mutual respect. Growth does not destroy real connections, it exposes unhealthy ones. Old dynamics also fall apart because transformation alters your emotional landscape. You begin to prioritize things differently. You want deeper conversations, more meaningful connections, healthier environments, and more honest interactions. People accustomed to superficiality may find this intensity overwhelming. People who benefited from your emotional labor may find your boundaries unfamiliar. People who were used to your silence may find your voice unsettling. The emotional equilibrium they relied on no longer exists, and they are forced to confront the reality that the version of you they interacted with was temporary, not permanent. As you evolve, you also expand your awareness. You start noticing things you once overlooked: manipulation, guilt-tripping, passive aggressiveness, exploitation, or subtle disrespect. In the past, these behaviors may have blended into the background of your relationships. Now they stand out clearly. This awareness disrupts the dynamic because it removes the invisible permission that allowed those behaviors to continue. Your transformation becomes a mirror that reveals truths others prefer to keep hidden. And this mirror becomes a source of tension rather than acceptance. Transformation doesn't just change how you behave, it changes how you think, what you value, and what you tolerate. And when you shift internally, your external world must shift with you. Some people will adjust, some will resist, some will step away, and some will push back harder than ever. It isn't because you've become difficult. It's because your evolution demands a recalibration of every relationship connected to you. The old dynamic simply cannot survive in the presence of your new identity. Your authenticity exposes their inauthenticity because true self-expression shines a light on every place where others have been hiding, pretending, or performing. Most people move through life wearing subtle masks. They adjust their personality to please, to be accepted, to avoid conflict, or to maintain an image. These masks become so habitual that they forget they're wearing them. But when you show up as your real self, unapologetic, clear, aligned, honest, it becomes impossible for others to ignore the parts of themselves they have buried beneath years of avoidance. Authenticity is powerful because it is rare. In a world where many choose convenience over truth, comfort over self-awareness, and approval over inner alignment, the presence of someone who is genuinely themselves creates a disruption. Not because you are trying to expose anyone, but because your very presence reveals the contrast. When you are free, those still bound by fear feel the weight of their chains. When you speak with sincerity, those who rely on pretense feel the thinness of their script. When you act from integrity, those who compromise feel the heaviness of their decisions. People who live inauthentically often depend on the illusion that they are doing the right thing by following the crowd or maintaining a persona. They build their identity on external validation, social expectations, or the desire to fit in. But authenticity cannot coexist quietly beside inauthenticity. The moment someone shows up fully real, it becomes clear who is hiding. This clarity makes some people uncomfortable, even resentful. They feel exposed not because you revealed them, but because your sincerity revealed them to themselves. Your authenticity also disrupts emotional patterns that rely on pretending. For example, when you express your true feelings calmly and openly, someone who suppresses their emotions may feel destabilized. They are forced to confront the fact that emotional honesty is possible. Something they have told themselves is too dangerous or too painful. When you honor your boundaries, those who lack boundaries feel the gaps in their own self-respect. When you pursue your passions without apology, those who abandon their dreams feel the sting of what they sacrificed. This isn't intentional, it's psychological mirroring. Your choices become a reflection of their compromises. Authenticity also reveals inauthenticity through the reactions it provokes. Someone who envies your self-expression might label you too much. Someone who fears being seen might accuse you of seeking attention. Someone who suppresses their desires may call your ambition selfish. Someone who is disconnected from their truth might say your confidence is arrogance. Their judgments are not about your behavior. They are about the discomfort your authenticity activates within them. They feel exposed, so they attempt to diminish you to regain emotional equilibrium. Interactions shift drastically when one person is real and the other is performing. Authenticity disarms manipulation because genuine people are harder to control. When you are grounded in who you are, guilt tactics, emotional games, and validation traps lose their power. This threatens those who rely on these strategies to feel secure. They feel unseen and ineffective, and rather than addressing their own patterns, they may paint your authenticity as a problem. Your clarity dissolves their illusions, and illusions do not go quietly. Authenticity also illuminates relationships that survive on surface-level energy. When you begin to express your true thoughts, values, and desires, shallow connections lose their stability. Who prefer the edited version of you may feel overwhelmed by your depth. People who benefited from your silence may feel challenged by your voice. People who assumed you would always accommodate may feel threatened when you choose alignment over approval. Your authenticity makes it impossible for them to interact with you in the old ways, which exposes the fragility of the connection. Even your presence can create pressure. An authentic person does not need to announce who they are. Their energy speaks for them. This energy creates contrast. It reveals who is acting from truth and who is acting from fear. Some will rise to meet you, others will withdraw to preserve their comfort, and some will respond with hostility because your authenticity disrupts the identity they have worked so hard to protect. It reveals the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. When you live authentically, you unintentionally hold up a mirror, not to judge, but to exist in truth. And that mirror reflects everything: the genuine, the hidden, the denied, and the avoided. People confronted with their inauthenticity often react defensively, not because you are wrong, but because they can no longer pretend they are right. Your authenticity exposes their inauthenticity simply by being what they have not yet allowed themselves to become. Rejection is often a reaction to your evolution, not your mistakes, because people rarely respond to who you truly are. They respond to who you were and the expectations they had of you. Every relationship, interaction, and social dynamic is built on a set of unspoken agreements and assumptions. When you change, when you grow, when you begin to embody qualities that were previously dormant, those expectations no longer fit. What was once familiar becomes foreign, and in that discomfort, people often react defensively, sometimes with judgment, criticism, or even rejection. Evolution is unsettling to those who have become comfortable with the old version of you. They have learned to predict your responses, rely on your patterns, and navigate around your limitations. When you shift those patterns, whether by asserting boundaries, pursuing new goals, speaking your truth, or embracing your worth, others can feel destabilized. They may interpret your self-expression as a threat, not realizing that your growth has nothing to do with them and everything to do with your own journey. Their rejection is a mirror reflecting their struggle with change, not a reflection of your value or your actions. People are naturally resistant to change, especially when it disrupts their sense of stability. When your evolution contradicts their assumptions, it forces them to confront their own stagnation. For example, if someone relied on your quiet compliance, your newfound assertiveness might feel like disloyalty. If someone benefited from your hesitation, your confidence might feel like defiance. If someone depended on your silence, your honesty might feel like aggression. In each case, the discomfort is not created by a mistake you made. It is created by the contrast between your evolving self and their static expectations. Rejection also emerges from fear. When people sense that you are moving beyond the roles, limitations, and definitions they assign to you, they experience a kind of subtle threat. They may worry that your growth diminishes their influence over you or exposes weaknesses in themselves. This fear can manifest as distance, criticism, gossip, or outright disapproval. The reaction is instinctive. When confronted with something unfamiliar or challenging, the human psyche seeks to neutralize it, often by pushing it away. Your evolution activates this process, which can feel like personal rejection, but it is rarely about a flaw or error on your part. In many cases, rejection is linked to projection. People often project their insecurities, fears, and unresolved conflicts onto others. When you evolve, you inadvertently hold up a mirror to them. Your courage, clarity, or self-respect highlights their avoidance, doubt, or dependency. In response, they may try to distance themselves, criticize you, or undermine your progress. This reaction is a defense mechanism. It protects them from facing the very discomfort your evolution brings into focus. The rejection is a reflection of their inner turmoil rather than evidence that you have done something wrong. Another reason rejection follows evolution is envy. Growth naturally attracts attention and admiration, and those who feel incapable of similar change may respond with resistance rather than support. The discomfort of seeing someone succeed, rise, or transform can manifest as subtle or overt rejection. Their response is not a verdict on your worth. It is an expression of their fear that they are being left behind. They may even attempt to shame, belittle, or isolate you to reconcile their internal conflict, masking their insecurity as criticism. Evolution also shifts the balance in relationships. People accustomed to old patterns may feel unsettled when those patterns are altered. Friendships, professional connections, or romantic bonds built on familiarity, dependency, or mutual avoidance are challenged when one party grows. You may start prioritizing different values, setting new boundaries, or seeking different experiences. Others who are unwilling to adapt to these changes may respond with withdrawal, hostility, or rejection, not because you have done something wrong, but because your evolution changes the dynamic they have relied upon. It is important to recognize that rejection in these circumstances is a sign of your expansion, not your failure. Every reaction of discomfort, withdrawal, or resistance from others is a natural response to the fact that you no longer fit the narrative they constructed. Your evolution disrupts expectations and exposes what is stagnant or unresolved in the people around you. It is not a judgment on your character, integrity, or value. In fact, the very discomfort your growth provokes is proof that you are moving forward, stepping into your authenticity and refusing to shrink to accommodate others' limitations. Rejection can feel personal because humans are wired to seek acceptance and belonging. When someone distances themselves or disapproves, it triggers instinctive feelings of inadequacy, shame, or guilt. But if you understand that their response is tied to their resistance to your evolution, these feelings lose their power. You begin to see that rejection often arises from their fear, insecurity, envy, or unwillingness to confront their own stagnation. What they perceive as a flaw in you is, in truth, a reflection of their discomfort with change. When you approach rejection with this perspective, it transforms from a wound into a signal. It reveals where your growth has stretched the boundaries of others' comfort zones. It indicates the areas where your evolution has demanded adaptation from those around you, whether they were ready or not. And it teaches you to distinguish between criticism rooted in truth and rejection rooted in someone else's inability to cope with your change. This awareness allows you to continue evolving without being derailed by others' resistance. When you rise, you force others to choose between growth and insecurity because your progress creates a mirror in which people are confronted with their own limitations. Your evolution does not occur in isolation. It ripples through the networks, relationships, and environments you inhabit. When you step into your power, embrace your potential, or embody your truth, it highlights the areas where others have resisted their own development. This confrontation is rarely comfortable. People are often unaware of how much of their life is guided by fear, avoidance, or unresolved wounds until they see someone else moving beyond those same constraints. In witnessing your rise, they are compelled to face the question, do I step into growth or do I retreat into the safety of insecurity? Insecurity thrives on comparison and projection. When someone is unsure of themselves, they seek validation from the outside world to fill the void they refuse to acknowledge internally. Your growth threatens this fragile equilibrium because it cannot be ignored. Your clarity, confidence, and progress shine a light on the disparity between who they are and who they want to be. Suddenly, they are confronted with the reality that they have allowed fear, doubt, or comfort to dictate their choices. This confrontation can provoke defensive behaviors, judgment, criticism, gossip, withdrawal, or even hostility. The reaction is not about you personally. It is about the uncomfortable truth that your rise makes unavoidable, the truth of their own unclaimed potential. When you embody authenticity, discipline, or courage, it challenges the stories that others have been telling themselves to justify stagnation. People often construct narratives to explain why they are not pursuing their dreams, speaking their truth, or honoring their boundaries. They might say, I don't have the opportunity, I'm not ready, or it's impossible for me. When you rise despite obstacles, fear, or uncertainty, it undermines those narratives. It reveals that the limitations were never absolute. They were chosen, tolerated, or unconsciously adopted. This revelation forces them to reckon with a choice, continue clinging to the safety of old excuses, or confront their insecurity and step into growth. The dynamic of growth versus insecurity also plays out in relationships. When you evolve, the balance of power, energy, and expectation shifts. Friends, family, and colleagues who relied on your previous patterns may feel destabilized. Someone accustomed to your availability may feel abandoned when you prioritize your goals. Someone used to your compliance may feel challenged when you assert your boundaries. Someone who benefited from your self-doubt may feel threatened when you gain confidence. Your rise forces them to examine their role in the dynamic. Do they adjust and grow alongside you, or do they allow insecurity to dictate their response, seeking to undermine, resist, or distance themselves from your evolution? Insecurity often masks itself as criticism, judgment, or competition. People who are unwilling to confront their own shortcomings may attack those who embody what they secretly desire. They may project their fear of failure onto you, labeling your ambition as arrogance, your boundaries as selfishness, or your emotional intelligence as detachment. By rising, you unintentionally hold up a mirror to their limitations. The choice they face is stark: acknowledge their fear and grow, or let insecurity drive their behavior in ways that preserve old patterns. Your progress forces them out of complacency, whether they like it or not. This principle also applies to professional and social environments. A person who consistently improves their skills, elevates their performance, or takes initiative can unsettle coworkers or peers who remain stagnant. Their rise highlights what others are not doing and what they are capable of doing but are avoiding. The discomfort they feel is a reflection of their own insecurity, not a reflection of your actions. They are confronted with the choice between letting your progress inspire them or allowing envy, fear, and inadequacy to dictate their response. In this way, your evolution becomes both a challenge and a test for those around you, revealing who is willing to stretch and who is unwilling to leave the familiar behind. When you rise, you also model a standard of living and being. Cannot be ignored. People instinctively compare themselves to those they encounter. If you are embodying integrity, discipline, courage, or creativity, it forces others to confront the question of whether they are living in alignment with their own potential. This confrontation can produce discomfort, defensiveness, or resentment because growth requires introspection, effort, and the willingness to face inner limitations. In contrast, insecurity offers the illusion of safety, allowing people to maintain their current state without taking responsibility for change. Your rise makes this choice unavoidable: either step forward into growth or remain trapped in the protective shell of insecurity. Ultimately, rising is not just a personal journey. It is a catalyst for others' self-examination. Your progress, clarity, and authenticity compel those around you to reconcile with their own desires, fears, and untapped potential. Your evolution challenges them to face their shadow, acknowledge what they have avoided, and make a conscious decision about who they want to become. The process is rarely smooth or comfortable for them. They may respond with support, resistance, admiration, or criticism, but behind every reaction lies the same fundamental choice: to pursue growth or to cling to insecurity.